Good morning and welcome to the Roll Jays podcast brought to you by Pixel Fire Marketing and Pyramid Contractors. Jimmie Allen, Casey Matthews with you here today. Following Creighton's loss to Nebraska and ahead of the matchup with San Diego State and the Players Era Festival in Las Vegas today at 1 o'clock. Obviously, noticeably absent today is Alex Drake, and nobody clearly cares about that. But Stephen Ashworth also not with us. Stephen's obviously healing up from the ankle injury. He's going to let us know when he's going to be available. He will be back, but we're letting him kind of rest and get back up on his feet, literally and figuratively, before he's back on the podcast. But obviously, our prayers and thoughts with the Ashworth family, and hopefully he can get back out of the court sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I mean, he's a tough kid.
Yeah,
he'll be fine. It's an ankle at the end of the day. Could have been a lot worse. So I think kind of dodged a bullet in that regard. So
it looked bad.
Yeah.
In real time, I thought he broke something. So the fact that he, I mean, I watched that replay back probably 46 times, and how he didn't break something is kind of amazing to me with the way his leg bent.
Yeah. I mean, some guys, man, they're just their ankles are built a little bit differently in that regard, and so yeah.
Well, I mean, I've broken my left one 3 times, so maybe I'm just prone to assuming anytime something happens to the lower part of your leg, it's supposed to snap in half. But Nebraska able to walk into the CHI Health Center for the second time in 3 years and pull off a victory. They knock off Creighton 63-74. And other than the Stephen Ashworth injury, obviously the headline is the fact that Ryan Kalkbrenner goes 0 for 1 from the field and breaks a 68-game streak of scoring at least 8 points in a row. What was your initial thought with the way that Fred Hoiberg and the Nebraska staff attacked Ryan Kalkbrenner, and how what the response was?
Yeah, I think they did a really good job. I think Nick Baugh was beating that drum pretty well in terms of their game plan. Look, I was actually at the Nebraska-Purdue game last year, and they did a pretty good job on Zach Edey last year as well.
Yeah.
They playing against a Zach Edey every year and a Kalk, every year. I mean, they're prepared, in terms of the coaching staff. I was disappointed in a couple things. I mean, one, I think our size and the guards really kind of showed because they pressured the ball and made those post passes hard. If you see, Steven had, I think, 2 or 3. Maybe Pop had one, Jimmie had one, trying to get the ball inside, and they just made it very difficult. Kalk's got to do a better job of keeping a strong low base and not releasing too early, because when you release early, you give your defender an opportunity to go and make a play on the ball, which is what happened a couple times. So I think on one hand, Nebraska did an excellent job in their game plan. We've got to have guys in the perimeter that can shoot to make it difficult to play it that way. But it's also partly on the guard and Kalk. Just the communication, a lot of it's nonverbal, right? And terms of where the ball needs to be and when it needs to be there. But I think you got to tip your cap to them. I think the stats a little misleading. I got a ton of texts about how they only get him one shot. Look,
he got plenty. Yeah,
he drew a ton of fouls, and some of those were shooting fouls, which the shot attempt doesn't register for that.
Yeah, so all of them were actually, every single shot was a shooting foul, which I'm not sure how that even happens.
Sure.
But more than the 0 for 1 from the field goal, the stat that stood out to me, and especially because of how much Mac and Ryan Kalkbrenner have both kind of mentioned it, was just going 50% from the free throw stripe. And I know, listen, he's a center, he's a big man, I get that, but that's part of his game that Ryan Kalkbrenner specifically has mentioned that he wants to get better at. And even in his 49-point performance to open up the season, Mac was like, hey, if you'd hit a free throw, you'd have had 50. So, and that night he shot 8 of 9 from the free throw line. But I think it was a lot of the reason, and I'm not making excuses, but this is just life. I think a lot of the reason that he only shot 50% from the free throw line is because he was incredibly frustrated. And it was very noticeable. I mean, his palms were up in the air a lot on Friday night. And I think a lot of it was, okay, you're going to direct it at the officials, all right, you're going to let them just kind of come in here and cross-body me all over the court tonight? And listen, that was their approach, and they have a pretty deep bench as far as their bigs are concerned, and I think that they were perfectly fine going as deep into their bench and try to let everybody else beat you. Now, I think there's a couple reasons that I think when you look at Creighton's board, and their depth chart, and you see the lack of experience that they have on it in this system. I think that's a risk you're willing to take at this point in the season, because you still do have some guys that are getting into some growing pains and not necessarily feeling comfortable in the system, and they have had some struggles from the field. I mean, as a whole, if you go 12 of 42 from beyond the arc, it doesn't matter what Ryan Kalkbrenner does. You're going to have to be able to be complimentary to him from outside of the paint anyway, and that's just not good enough to get it done. But I think we talked about this on the postgame show on 1620 The Zone. We talked about the fact that the same thing happened last year against UNLV. The same thing happened last year against Colorado State. So we had a caller call in talking about Mac needs to change the system, and I'm so sick of losing like this. And it's like, okay, well, you're sick of the Sweet 16 appearances because this system is what got you there. And it doesn't matter what system you run in basketball. If you're not hitting field goals, you're not going to win games. This is not football. This is basketball. It's one game. And this game, albeit to your in-state rival, and you want to win this every year for an obvious reason, doesn't determine the rest of the season. And nor do I think it'll be indicative of the way we look at this team at the end of the year.
Yeah. I mean, you threw a lot out there. I would say there's a few things. With Kalk, throughout his career, one of the things I've been the most proud of him for is his development mentally. As a freshman, he came in he would tell you, very just weak-minded. He's been
he said that on the show.
Yeah. He's been the biggest guy on his team, biggest guy on his AU team. Like, he's never really had a lot of resistance. So he comes in here and he gets hit with a lot of that resistance and a lot of expectations, and he didn't do a very good job handling it. So he's developed that. Now, that game against Nebraska is interesting because, yes, he did struggle from the free throw line. You hope that he can turn the page and understand that he's put in the work necessary to be a good free throw shooter. It was a rough night. Some of that was mental. I think some of that, sometimes you just have a bad night. I look forward to seeing him turn the page, and we'll see, because if that snowballs into being an issue for him shooting free throws, that is worrisome, because that is such a threat to be able to throw him the ball in tight situations and draw a foul and know that he's going to hit his free throws.
Well, are you with me in the sense of you think he's going to be fine though? Like, and that was an outlier, because I think he's going to be fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I would at this point in his career, I'd be surprised if he allows this one to really linger. Where I think I'm more concerned, like in this team, and I'll be honest with Jimmie, I am worried about it. There's a lot of things that I saw. The biggest thing for me, the most disappointing thing of that whole game for me, was the effort. I felt like Nebraska played harder. They wanted to win more, and it just in
the post-game show, Pop Isaacs, Jackson McAndrew, and Greg McDermott all echoed the same thing you just said.
Okay, see, I got to watch some of that stuff. That was really frustrating for me to see, and I saw it within the first 5 minutes. I remember. Well, my daughter both my daughters had a little school dance that I was at, and I was watching it on my phone, and my wife's like, "What's wrong with you?" I'm like, "I don't like it. They're not playing hard." And like, she's, my wife's the best. She's like, "How can you see that on a phone?" I'm like, "Trust me, it's pretty glaring."
I've done this a time or two.
Yeah, it was disappointing, and we're going on tangents. I think this part of this podcast is a good one, just to sort of talk. Is that, like, this team for me has to be a team that's driven more defensively and gets their energy more defensively.
Agreed.
In the past, we've been so good offensively that we could rely on Baylor, we could rely on Trey, Steven, whoever, right, to hit a big shot to give us some energy, and then that would continue on into our defense. To me, this team has to flip the script and really take pride in hey, we might not score 80 points a game, but we can guard and we can keep teams from scoring, and then we can get energy that way. That's what I hope is the difference. They're not going to change the system. I mean, hey, everybody's entitled to their opinion. That doesn't mean that you're necessarily right or wrong. That one's wrong.
You're wrong, by the way.
You don't change your system. That's got you. I mean, we just celebrated. He's the winningest coach in Creighton history. So let's change that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think our point guard is the problem, right? I think Steven's a very good point guard in this system. Had a rough night. It happens.
So I think the sentiment of the caller was, and he kind of started off with this, and I think this is where he was trying to go, but just kind of, he may have had a few. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
And he said he did make one good point, and this is something I think Pop would probably agree with too. They do need this team specifically does need to do a better job with their guards, specifically Pop Isaacs and Jimmie Neal with getting to the rim and finishing at the rim. And I agree with that sentiment, especially on the nights where you are struggling from the field. And I think that's been the thought process behind the shortcomings of Creighton fans for a long time. Okay, what do we do if Let It Fly doesn't work? Can we pivot? If you don't, to your point, if you don't have a Baylor Shireman or Trey Alexander that can hit threes to energize this team, what's next? What do you do outside of that? And I think that's a question, to your point, that this team specifically has to figure out, especially with Stephen Ashworth being sidelined for however long he's going to be. Just in a guess from a lower ankle injury, probably January is probably what you're hopeful at this point. And that's Stephen hasn't given me anything. That's not any insider knowledge. I don't know. I'm just assuming somebody that's had way too many ankle injuries in their lifetime for expectations. But and Pop ended up leading the team in scoring too, and I think that's important to point out. So I mean, if we're gonna criticize, we got to give his flowers a little bit. He ended up scoring 25 points, but was 5 of 12 from beyond the arc, and that's got to be better. But when we talked about the difference of last year's team to this year's team and what needs to be different, what will look different, you, me, Alex, and anybody that knew this team said, well, they should have a lot better of ability to get to the rim and finish because that's what Pop Isaacs does. Mm-hmm. Now, he's also drinking through a fire hose trying to learn this offensive system, this defensive system. Oh, and by the way, he's coming off of a major hip injury. So there are some things that need to be accounted for and accountable, and that performance is one of them. But we've seen this a year ago. This is what happens when you have to play the transfer portal game and get guys that don't have a couple years to sit and learn the system to come and plug and play to where they have to learn on the fly. And especially if they're beat up a little bit, it is going to take a little bit of time. Now, he does have to be better at that, but it is still November. Yeah. There still is the Big East tournament, Big East regular season play to go as well.
Yeah, here's where I would say why I'm concerned. Yeah. First of all, right now we're top 10 in the country in 3-point shot attempts versus 2-point shot attempts. We shoot 53% of our shots are from three. Okay, if you look historically, max teams have been in the 40s, low to mid 40s. Which over the course of the season, that 5% is a huge difference, right? So one, we're shooting too many threes. The problem, and everybody can see that. The issue is that
hot take by the way
is the real issue. Okay, and I don't mean to disparage anybody. Is we don't have very good 3-point shooters, except for Steven. And I would argue Isaac can shoot, even though he's had a rough start to the season shooting the ball, and Jackson McAndrew. So that to me is the issue, is that you've got a 3 who shoots on a good day, he's going to shoot 34% from 3. And then you've got a 2 who has historically been inefficient offensively. I do think he's going to be much better in this system over the course of the remaining of his career. And I will say, I think Pop is taking, for the most part, good shots. Yeah. I don't have a problem with the shots that he's taking, but the difference is this: you went from Trey Alexander and Baylor Shireman to Pop Isaacs and Jimmie Neal, and hey, those two they're playing, they're doing their best that they can, but it doesn't matter.
It's 2 NBA guys.
It's exactly, and so you're filling what? I don't have it in front of me. You're filling 1,000 shots.
Probably more, if I had to guess.
Okay, with 2 guys that are worse offensive players. So, look, that's why I say this team has to have pride defensively, because you cannot just say it's not a plug and play deal. Mac's a genius. Mac is brilliant. But
he needs to change the system, apparently.
Yeah, right. At the end of the day, like, you've got to have the right ingredients to make to make the recipe work, or the final product just isn't as good, and that's okay. It's really, I mean, listen, you're not gonna be a championship team every single year. Like, you're gonna have to have some years where you play differently and where you win differently. That doesn't necessarily mean that you change, quote unquote, change the system. So
you mentioned IT a second ago, and I like, disappointment's probably too much of too strong a word, but I was a little disappointed in his performance against Nebraska specifically. He's a Nebraska kid. He gets what this means. But B, he had a really good game against Kansas City. He ended up scoring 13 points with 3 of 8 from beyond the arc, and a couple of those at the end of the game where the game was out of hand and it was just kind of a free for all. So I get that, but I would like to see him just because some of the things he told us when he was on the podcast, some things I've heard him say specifically unsolicited about improvement this year. I want him to be able to stack games, and we're now on season 3 of talking about that 4 position and how it factors in.
Mm-hmm.
Not how it's going to help.
Right.
How can you really contribute anything to this offense? And I think he's a guy that if in the right mindset and at the best of his ability can absolutely have some sort of effect on that spot. And for him to come out and put a nothing burger up in this game, I know hurt him specifically, but it could hurt his growth as well, and I want to see him take another step forward this year.
Yeah, Jimmie, I see. I definitely relate. I know what you're saying. I mean, I love that kid so much, and he has worked. It's pretty obvious.
And honestly, I want it for him more than anything.
Yeah, like and truly, I think he's a guy that you hate saying you deserve it. I don't know that anybody ever really deserves it. Like you got to earn it, but he has put in the work. Sometimes this term depth, and I kind of called Alex out on it a few weeks ago, of like depth on paper and actual depth are different things.
Yes.
And Mac's still searching, I think, for
the last 2 years are a direct testament to that.
Yeah. But what's happening to me, which to me is glaring, is Jackson McAndrew is really good. And so, what I think you're seeing now is like, okay.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I got to ask this. Are you surprised with how far along he is already this early in his freshman career?
I guess
I know he's the highest rated recruit in school history, but that only matters if he's got the goods.
I don't think I'm surprised just because too, like his dad, his dad played, he actually played for Mac, and he's grown up in all around basketball. He's played it his entire life at a really high level. So I don't say I'm surprised. I think I'm like,
do you know about the ongoing beef between Jackson and Greg McDermott? Have you heard the story?
I haven't heard this one.
They're in a war of words. When Jackson went 0-7 the other night, Mac said, "Oh, you looked a lot like your dad tonight." And then when Jackson had the bounce back game, he told Mac, "Now you looked a little bit more like me today."
That's funny. I haven't heard that one. I think he's a stud, and I think
he's really good.
Here's the thing: when you go back to Isaac, it's like you want to give Isaac the opportunity to play through mistakes and do those things. It's just really hard. Same thing for Jason. Like you want to give these guys, like, which we'll get to San Diego State, I hope, here in a minute. Yeah. I think this could be a huge game, a game we could really use Jason. But like when you have a guy as talented as Jackson on the bench, sometimes it's like, hey man, you know what? If we're gonna live with mistakes,
it's hard to keep him off the court, right?
Yeah, I'd rather live with mistakes from a guy that I really think has a brighter future. If I'm being
not even that. It's a guy that has shown you he's got the ability to overcome. I mean,
sure.
Not that Isaac hasn't, and obviously Jackson probably at this point has had really more meaningful playing time than Isaac has this season, and he's given you a little bit more. But I do want to get into San Diego State. Stick around. We're going to take a quick break here. Give a little pause for the cause. We'll be right back breaking down the game today and talking about Casey's favorite coach, Dan Hurley, and a whole lot more here on the Roll Jays podcast.
Are you dreaming of your business dominating local Google searches, drawing in customers effortlessly? Look no further. I'm Courtney, the Google gal from Pixel Fire Marketing. Need assistance with your Google business profile? From verification to getting more reviews, fixing maps to tackling annoying Google calls? I've got you covered. Your profile sets you apart and ensures you're the top choice for local customers. Visit fixmygbp.com for our $297 special offer. Visit fixmygbp.com for more details.
When you shop local, you help strengthen our community. So if you need roof repair, gutters, siding, even windows, call local Pyramid Contractors. They're the #1 roofer in Omaha for more than a dozen years. Let Pyramid Contractors come and give you a free estimate. Give them a call at 402-502-9300. That's 402-502-9300. Or visit them online at PyramidRoof.com. Never settle for less.
All right, welcome back to the Roll Jays podcast. Jimmie Allen, Casey Matthews with you here today ahead of Creighton's matchup with San Diego State. This one, obviously, a little sore subject for a lot of people coming off that that Elite Eight game just a few years ago. Obviously, both teams much different places than they were in that tournament, with much different talent around them as well. Casey, you've been hitting the books hard, studying San Diego State. Initial thoughts on the Aztecs?
Yeah, they're good. They're very different from when we played them last, but they're good. They're still really physical. They've got some length that I think could be troublesome. Their point guard, or one of their guards, Nick Boyd's a FAU transfer, played on that Final Four team a couple years ago. Can shoot it. Just knows how to
leading
scorer
too.
Offense. Yeah, just controls the game. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a game where one is we need to hold them to one shot attempt and get the rebound. I'm interested to see how fast we play, especially since we don't have Steven. I'm expecting Ty Davis to get the start today.
Yeah.
And just interesting to see how we play. I'm really excited for Ty. I think he's got a great opportunity to just get out there and play and not have to look over his shoulder. So yeah, I think that's going to be interesting. I think Jared Coleman-Jones is a really good four-man, can pick and pop. I'm interested to see kind of how we guard him. I mean, there's really nobody on the court that you can dork. That was our terminology of like a guy that you could just not guard, essentially. There's really nobody out there that
I did not know that. That's great.
Yeah, we'd have dork guys. The closest, I mean, gosh, I don't even know. I don't know. I'm looking at their sheet right now because I mean, but we'll go ahead.
For any Creighton fan that's saying, Nebraska put a blueprint out there on how you attack the Jays and what can stop this offense or slow it down or neutralize Ryan Kalkbrenner, you can honestly have the same conversation about what Gonzaga did to San Diego State. Now, obviously, Gonzaga's talent probably a little bit better than Nebraska's, and you could probably put on paper and say Gonzaga should have won that game anyway. But to your point, the Bulldogs were able to let BJ Davis and Nick Boyd, who you just mentioned, kind of get theirs and then stifle everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at Nick Boyd, I don't think it matters who he goes up against in the country. He's going to get his. And if you can live with that and kind of take away everybody else, and essentially maybe he's your dork. Hey, let him get his because it's going to happen anyway, and shut down everybody else, or at least take away certain elements of what they want to do offensively outside of him. Yeah. I think you have a chance to not only win this game, but maybe have a bit of a bounce back, feel better about heading into Wednesday's matchup as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't dork Nick Boyd, but I do know what you mean. Just let him get his. And,
I let him have less of the attention, not necessarily not guard him.
Sure. But. Yeah, the only thing with that is that this team has different ways they can beat you, and so I'm interested. I mean, I think if we had Steven, I'd feel a lot better. Obviously, just because I think we'd be more dangerous on the perimeter, and they wouldn't be able to pack it in quite as much. I'm interested to see how they guard Ty. Do they let him shoot? Do they pressure him?
He's struggled a little bit with pressure on Friday night.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, listen, like this is why you play in these deals. Like this event is something where hopefully a lot of money gets to our NIL, but they don't invite bad teams to play in this event. So you're not gonna be able to just roll the balls out and get a W here. This one's gonna have to be earned, and then good luck tomorrow too. So
speaking of the NIL, you can donate to Creighton's Bird Club by scanning the QR code in the top right corner right now. All proceeds will go towards Creighton athletics, their student athletes, as well as benefiting this podcast as well. Make sure you donate to the Bird Club today. I
would like to see us get their bigs in foul trouble. I wanted to add that that would be something I'd like to see us attack the rim, get into their body, get Kalk involved early, see if we can get a couple fouls. They're big man. Magoon Gwath leads the country in block percentage. So I don't know that challenging him necessarily, is smart, but I think you have to just see if you can draw some.
I agree. Well, and if people are going to look at the Nebraska game and say, okay, this is how you beat Creighton, You got to be ready for it too, right? And you got to make, if they're going to be willing to send bodies and get guys in foul trouble, you have to make them pay for it. And not only necessarily Ryan Kalkbrenner, but I think Jimmie Neal and whoever ends up playing that 4 has to be stronger at the rim, draw fouls, and then make the other team pay for it too. And show, put it on film that, hey, if this is the approach you're going to take, we're going to give you death by 1,000 cuts. We'll beat you at the free throw line.
Yeah. I mean, those guys have to be able to attack the rim. We kind of hit on it earlier. I mean, they're definitely able to do it, right? I think you got to have one, either you're going to beat your man off the dribble, or your bigs have to set really good screens, which is something that Kalk needs to do.
He struggled with that on Friday night too, but again, I think a lot of that was frustration.
That and just the physicality, man. I mean, it's really hard. That's why this isn't, I mean, to be honest with you, dude, this is not a good matchup. I was texting with Lucas and just said, hey, man, just what do you think? And he's like, hey, I think we got a shot. We're going to get out there and play hard, but the physicality is going to be interesting. And, you worry about that with a freshman point guard, but hey, it's a great opportunity for him too. Yeah. And if he goes out there and plays tough,
I know nobody wants to hear this and talk about moral victories, et cetera, especially when a team like this has the expectations it does. This is going to help Ty Davis 3 years from now, not today. The time that he gets out on the court, the experience he gets today is going to pay dividends much further down the road, but may end up helping by the end of the season as well.
Absolutely. It's not, I don't even think 3 years. I think 3 weeks,
Sure.
Like he's just minutes, man. You got to have minutes. It's like you look back to a guy like Marcus Zagorowski, who when Marcus came in, Davion Mintz was on paper the starting point guard. He started getting some minutes, some opportunities. Next thing you know, he's our starting point guard. And then Davion
worked out.
Davion ends up transferring, right? Like, now I'm not saying that's obviously not going to happen in our situation with Steven. But
he doesn't have any transfer years left.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But those early minutes for Marcus were huge for him, allowed him to build some confidence, figure out who he is. And obviously we're all really happy that we had the opportunity to be around Marcus for a couple of years.
I need you to defend your boy. Not only is Creighton coming off a loss, the defending national champions are as well. Dan Hurley and UConn fall to Memphis.
Why is he my boy? Look,
it's your boy.
I love Hurley. I do.
And that is why he's your boy right there. Listen, I agree with his take about the ticky-tack foul. I actually think that the Memphis rebounder actually jumped underneath the Husky rebounder, and that foul should have never been called. I agree with that. You have to have a little bit of better situational awareness and know when you can't lose your cool, though, right?
100%. Look, he tried to get it in the first half. So I texted you guys, right?
Yeah. He should have had two.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I put that one on him. Like, for your team to fight back, take the lead, get it to overtime, and then you basically cost them that opportunity with your.
They still had a chance to win it though at the end.
Yeah, like that's disappointing. But I mean, I'm not saying I know Coach Hurley, but knowing who he is and what he's about, like. I'm not saying he'll learn from it.
Yeah, don't worry, I'm not either.
But I do know enough to know that team today will come out fired up and playing a lot harder than they did from the tip yesterday. It's. I don't think you can defend it. I think he's a great coach. I'll tell you a story about technical fouls it's something I'll never forget. Was my first year here. We're playing a home against Nova, and we're taking care of business against Villanova. We're playing well. We're beating them. And Jay Wright just goes absolutely bonkers on the side.
I remember this. Yeah.
Gets a technical foul. The rest of the game, they got every call imaginable. Okay. And totally turned the game. They ended up beating us. And I remember talking to Mac after the game, and he said, yeah, that was 100% on purpose. He got the technical on purpose because he wanted to send a message to his team. And also he knew the referees weren't going to give him another one. So they would be able to do that. The difference with Hurley is like he
doesn't care about the second one. Yeah.
Well, they didn't give him that first one.
Yeah.
And had he got the one in the first half, that game's totally different. And so it's interesting. I mean, I've told you this. I've been on the show. Look, you get to know some of these officials because during timeouts they come over, you talk to them, and I always love to talk to officials. And I can't tell you who said it, but a couple people have told me the officials don't exactly love Coach Hurley. They respect him as a coach, but they hate officiating his games. So
I don't think you need anybody to tell you that.
no,
it's pretty apparent.
Do you remember the first time he coached
in Omaha, right?
In the CHI?
Yeah.
I hope I'm not repeating a story, but it's a really funny story actually. When he was at Rhode Island, he had an official that he was just riding during the game, and ended up getting in some hot water with it. Some stuff went into the officiating, the NCAA officiating, and this one official was no longer officiating Coach Hurley's games in the league, right? Well, fast forward, he comes to CHI. That official was on that game. That official is the one that gave him the technical foul. So it's interesting.
You're saying there may be something behind it, huh?
100%. Hey, they're human beings,
right? Yeah,
human beings, and
I agree.
And I think he even laughed about it afterwards. All right.
Well, and I think it kind of matters how you treat people too. I think
it does. It absolutely does, and that's why the refs love Mac. Like Mac is the greatest. I've been around a lot of head coaches. I've worked for a lot of good ones. Mac is the best. It's not close on dealing with officials, and
I don't know if the guys on Friday night would agree with you. He had some things to say.
But Jimmie, look, he was able to do it, and they listen. Like when Mac talks, they listen.
That's a good point because you have to be able to do the
that. Yeah, it's awesome. It was really neat. It was really neat for me to watch and learn from, because it does matter how you treat people. But at the end of the day, if you got the best players and you're going to win the national championship, do whatever you want, I guess, right? That's
hey, listen, you got that built-in clout too, right? You got two rings to determine that you're probably not going to lose your job over this.
Yeah, he's probably safe. He's probably safe, and if he does, like, he'll be okay.
Yeah, you know what? He might find another gig. Hey, we'll wrap this up. Give me your thoughts about today. Give me a score prediction for Creighton versus.
Oh God, I'm so bad at score predictions, dude. You know,
I mean, you're bad at most of this, but we just let you keep coming back.
I am. Gosh, a score prediction. I don't know. I can't do that, Jimmie. I can't do it. I'm so bad. I think the game's in the 60s.
Give me a key to the game. What does Creighton have to do to win today?
Limit them to one shot opportunity and get and rebound the ball.
Yeah, I think they got to win the rebounding game, and they got to finish at the rim a little bit better than they did really in every game this season. I've been Jimmie Allen. That's Casey Matthews. We'll be back following the holiday, wrapping up the entire Players Era Festival and giving our thoughts on the Big East season and what's ahead. We still got Kansas and Alabama on the schedule too. Strap in, Jays fans. It's going to be a good season. Don't forget, you can still donate to the Bird Club Creighton's NIL Collective by scanning the QR code in your top right corner. Not only does it benefit your favorite student athletes, it also benefits this podcast as well. We'll see you after the holiday. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on the Roll Jays podcast. Brought to you by
we miss you, Alex.
by Pixel Fire Marketing and Pyramid Contractors. See you after the holiday.